Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. Well, I suppose you'll be moving on now. I'm staying. That is, if you'll have me. Oh, I'll have you. Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Erschen. This week we are doing another movie review. This is Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter. From Hammer Films, released in 1974, written and directed by Brian Clemens. Yes, so the film was released in 1974, stars Horst Janssen in the role of Captain Kronos, John Carson in the role of Dr. Marcus, who you might know from films like, Plague of the Zombies, he's in Taste the Blood of Dracula, as is Carolyn Monroe's in this film as well, plays Carla, the young gypsy girl that they pick up along the way. And it's kind of crazy because you see this gorgeous woman, one of the most beautiful women ever, and she's dirty and dressed in rags the whole time, but it doesn't matter, she still looks beautiful. The film also stars John Cater in the role of Professor Grost. He's this hunchback professor, and he's basically the sidekick of Captain Kronos, pretty much. He's his assistant. So yes, this film, I'd say, is not a straight-up horror film. It's more of kind of a swashbuckling adventure, like Robin Hood and Three Musketeers meet vampire movies, I guess that's probably the best way to describe it, And there's definitely a lot of humor in there, too. It's not as dark as some of the other Hammer films, like the Draculas and the Frankensteins and stuff like that. There's certainly horror in there, when you're dealing with vampires, and these vampires are a lot different than the typical vampires, because these vampires drain the victims of their youth, not just their blood. So when they attack, their victims become very aged and old and decrepit, and they die very quickly, So that's something different. We haven't seen that before, and especially in the Hammer films, So this is a different kind of vampire. And when you see them, they're in these black cloaks. They look like, cult members or something, You don't see that. You never see the vampire's face or anything. You just see, the dark black cloak, and then, they lure the victims in, and you only see kind of from the camera's perspective, looking at the victim as they strike on their prey. And they see the women, they're dumbstruck for a minute, and then they smile, because the vampire using the seductive powers, and then there's one scene when the girl's like, oh, ah, And then next scene you see her old and decrepit and dying, and then we meet Dr. Marcus, played by John Carson, great Hammer actor, great British actor. He does such a good job as Dr. Marcus, kind of the older veteran type guy, but he knows his stuff, very intelligent, and I guess he's an old friend of Captain Kronos, I think they served in the British Army together. And yes, so Horst Janssen plays Captain Kronos, who I'm not sure if I've seen him in any other movies, but he does a great job. He's very charismatic, he's almost like a Zorro for a vampire killer, He's got his trusty sword, he's got the cool K logo on his horse, and yeah, good looking guy, former captain in the army. Now he's a vampire hunter. That's what he does for a living now. So yeah, along the way he meets back up with Dr. Marcus to help him, because Dr. Marcus is seeing these victims pile up around him in his town. You know, these women being attacked in the woods in the bright daylight, and they're very aged suddenly, rapidly, and they die. So they try to get to the bottom of it. They team up along with Professor Grost, who's like this hunchback guy, also very intelligent, and he knows all about vampire lore and vampire history and what to do in these situations. And also another thing with Dr. Marcus, he meets up with this woman who was the wife of one of his friends, you know, who died very young, you know. So he goes to visit the cemetery and he runs into his friend's son, and then he talks about the wife, how she was just such a great woman, very nice, very pleasant, very beautiful. And she's actually sitting in the stagecoach. And, oh, is she there? And then he kind of gets a glimpse at her and notice that she's rapidly aged as well, you know, because she shouldn't be that old. And the son is just, oh, she's in mourning, you know, she's very upset, she's very distraught, she's very depressed. But she's very aged, and he thinks that's strange, you know, if I could only examine her, you know, but the son kind of casts it off and leaves, and it goes back to their big castle, of course, because it's got to be a big gothic castle in one of these movies. and what happens is, along the way, Dr. Marcus tries to help one of the victims, and he gets attacked. And he becomes a vampire, and he flips out, and he tells Captain Kronos, and, you know, what are we going to do? I'm a vampire. You see his teeth growing, you know, the fangs. So what they do is they tie him up to a chair, and they start, you know, deciding what they're going to do. Are they going to have to kill him, you know? They have no choice, and Dr. Marcus is like, yes, kill me, I want to get this over with, end my suffering. So they grab a wooden stake, big huge wooden stake, pound it into his heart, and nothing happens. It's just like a little scar there, no blood. And yeah, they try and burn him, they try and hang him, and they find that the only thing that works is a steel crucifix that he had tied to his neck. That's the only thing that killed him. Not being hung or burned or staked through the heart. None of that works. Only the power of the crucifix. The power of good over evil. So what they do is they go to the local cemetery. They find the biggest, hugest iron cross they could find, and they steal it and they take it to their workshop, where in dramatic fashion Professor Gross melds together and molds together this beautiful sword made of an iron cross, and that's Captain Kronos' new weapon. That's how he's going to stop the vampires and put an end to this plague of madness. And yes, along the way they meet this young gypsy girl by the name of Carla, played by the legendary Carolyn Monroe, who, yeah, like I said, she's beautiful, but she's dirty and rags, and apparently she's been chained and hooked up to this, you know, kind of Spanish Inquisition device where she's trapped in, and Captain Kronos on his horse sees her there, and, you know, he decides to rescue her, so he lops off the thing and frees her, and, you know, right away she gets the hots for him, you know, this good-looking young man, you know, this swashbuckling, daring, young lad, and, you know, she falls for her, and they have a romantic relationship, they have a rendezvous. So she decides to follow him on their adventures, not knowing that they're vampire hunters. She doesn't find that out till later on. But she willingly joins along with them on their quest to stop these evil monsters from taking over the world. There's definitely some great scenes of action, some sword fighting. There's this one great scene where this local bar is being run by these bullies, these a-holes, you know, and everyone's afraid of these guys, you know. Especially this one guy who's such a douche, you know, and he picks on the patrons and the guests at the bar, and, you know, he basically runs everyone out of the bar, you know. And, but they come across Captain Kronos, and that's going to be their last time bullying anybody. And the guy, they come in for a drink, and this guy's, like, talking smack, you know, making fun of Professor Gross because of his hunchback, you know. He's like, "So, Dr. Crookback, you know, how do you sleep? Do you dig a hole and put your hump in there?" Or, you know, and the dude's like, "His name is Grost." And then the guy's like, "Oh, Crookback will do for me, but it won't do for me." And the guy's like, "Oh, it won't do, huh?" You know, and Kronos just takes out his sword and whips like all three of them, and they all drop to their knees and die instantly, you know. And then everyone realizes, you know, this dude's for real, you know. There's a reason he's the captain, you know. And once again at the cemetery, when they're trying to get the cross, all the townsfolk get together because they think he is responsible for the death of Captain Marcos, you know, Dr. Marcus. You know, John Carson's character, because Dr. Marcus was very respected in town. You know, they don't take kindly to, you know, like, you killed this guy, you know, he's one of the most upstanding citizens in our town, you know, so they basically get all together, you know, try and take him out, and he just whoops all their asses, you know. It's Captain Kronos, dude, he's a bad dude. No one better with a sword, and that's why he's the perfect guy to take on the vampire. So throughout the film, they're trying to find out where this is all coming from. Who is the master? Who is the head vampire? And spoiler alert, if you have not seen this movie, I am going to talk about the end a little bit. So they do find out that it's Lady Durwood, the old woman that is bedridden and decrepit and old. Suddenly she's gathered up enough blood from the victims to make herself young and beautiful again. And what she does is she raises her husband from the dead, who's like this badass soldier too, and badass with the sword as well. So of course you have the final epic encounter, sword fight between this vampire and Captain Kronos, vampire hunter. And they have it out, you know. So this movie is so much fun. I'd have to say this is probably the most fun film in the Hammer canon. It is one of the last great Hammer films. It's not scary per se, but it's great. You got a great cast. You got John Carson, who's a veteran, excellent actor, you know, great cast. You got the lovely, the beautiful Carolyn Monroe, legend and icon in horror. And together they make a fantastic film. It's got a great kind of light-hearted score in this film. It's not as dark as some of the other Hammer films like the Gothic Draculas and Frankenstein. This is definitely a more light-hearted film. It's more like an adventure/horror film. But it's so much fun. It's a great time and a great Hammer film. So yes, I definitely highly recommend Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter from 1974, written and directed by Brian Clemens. So definitely check it out, guys. I will say probably get a better version, get the Blu-ray, this from Scream Factory version of Captain Kronos, because this DVD isn't all that great. I mean, this isn't even Captain Kronos on the cover, and look, nowhere on this is Carolyn Monroe. How are you going to not have Carolyn Monroe on the DVD? But at any rate, Still a fantastic film, and thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared. Folks, don't forget to grab your Sean Patrick Erschen gear and represent the Horror Corner. Also, check out these awesome mugs we have, perfect for your coffee. And definitely check out the Horror Hangout live stream t-shirt and represent the legacy of the Horror Hangout. Check out the link in the description below this video.